I want to talk about the brand's role in tackling LGBTQ plus hate in the media. But before I do so, I just want to really thank Valentino for joining us today. And I do hope that when you're considering your campaigns, when it comes around to Pride next year, I want to see that intersex inclusive Pride flag over all of your campaigns. Thank you. So yes, what we want to do on this panel today is we want to have a meaningful discussion that inspires positive actions. We really want to explore this problem. It's a really knotty problem, and yeah, it really needs a lot of thoughtful discussion. We're going to do what we can in the 35 minutes that we've got. But firstly, in the words of Scylla, what's your name and where'd you come from? And I'm going to start with you, Michelle. 15 seconds for each of you. I'm going to be really hot on time.
15 seconds. Okay, hi, I'm Michelle Sarpong, and I work at the Seven Stars, and my current role is Head of Display, Audio and Out-of-Home Activation.
Thank you.
I like that.
Brilliant. Great, very fast. Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Wilson. I'm the director and co-founder of Stop Funding Hate.
Oh, I have a clicker. Right, there we go. It's me that's causing delays. There we go. That helps, but doesn't it?
Okay.
Ben.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Cohen. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the chief executive of Pink News, and Pink News exists to inform, inspire change, and empower people to be themselves.
That's very good. And Florie.
Hi everyone, I'm Florie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the marketing director for Skin & Me. For those of you who don't know Skin & Me, we're a very new business. We're a startup that was founded 2.5 years ago. And our mission is to change the skincare industry and make sure that everybody has the right treatment to live their best skin in life. And I'll be representing the advertiser side today. We're a new brand. We really care about diversity, but sometimes we also get it a bit wrong. So I'm planning on being quite unfiltered and just give you the truth of what it is to be a brand these days and how we can be better together.
Thank you, Florie. And I suppose I should introduce myself. So I'm Marty. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a creative strategist and founder of Smarty Pants Consultancy. And I'm also the co-director of advocacy and activism at Outvertising. So yeah, thank you all for joining me today. I'm very happy that you've all decided to join me. It's a very carefully curated panel to get the whole kind of rich, diverse perspectives around this whole issue. So yeah, let's get started. So firstly, I want to kind of talk about the actual problem. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about the problem. So as Nancy was talking about earlier, Nancy Kelly from Stonewall, there's a real problem just actually diving into trans specifically, the T of LGBTQ+. We can actually see that the rise, that green line, that rise in kind of trans-related stories, much of the negative, as Nancy was saying, has been incredibly steep over the last few years. You actually can see that when you exclude Pink News, who we can safely say are very positive about what they talk about when it comes to trans people, that's still 15,939 stories about trans people. That's over 1,000 trans hostile or neutral articles in one 30-day period, as Nancy was saying. So it's an incredible amount of coverage. And you've got publications like, legacy media, like Telegraph, The Times, The Daily Mail, some of the most prolific. And actually, as Nancy was saying earlier, surprisingly, you might think, but Guardian also, which it was interesting when Kendra was speaking earlier, that's actually the most read of the legacy media from our community. And maybe it might be surprising to some of you in the room that they aren't completely trans inclusive in the way that they approach it.
Definitely not trans.
Definitely not trans inclusive. I'm trying to be polite, but yeah, no.
Not in the UK, anyway.
Not in the UK.
Not in the US. Maybe.
Yeah, and then also, what we've seen as well, if this progresses, is that, as Nancy was saying as well, that positive public attitudes towards trans people have actually eroded in the last couple of years. It's actually just looking specifically at a disbelief in people's expressed gender identities. So people just not believing that trans people are who they say they are, that's diminished. And people believing that transgender women pose a risk to cis women, that belief has become stronger. And these are things that people are reading in our national news media. And then we can also see as well, I've got slightly different figures from Nancy, but I'm using the government statistics that were published in October. So just use their own figures against them, I expect. So 43% increase in sexuality hate crime and 56% increase in transgender hate crime. So, you know, this isn't just stories. This has a real world impact on people's lives. Oh, I'm going to go back a second. So yeah, that sets up the problem really nicely. So firstly, I'd actually just like to come to Richard initially on this. How would you define hate in the media?
So, with all of those examples there, I mean, it's typically media content that targets a whole group based on their identity. So obviously the transphobic media content is a clear example of that. And an example specifically might be the Times ran a pretty notorious headline saying children sacrificed to appease the trans lobby. So it's framing trans people as a threat. This is kind of threatening lobby that's being super demanding, and it's harming children. So one of the ways that we sometimes hear people talking about it is defining a group of people as a problem or a burden or a threat. And that's very much the direction of so much of the media coverage. The other thing maybe to say is it's not just about the individual examples, it's about the cumulative impact of that drip, drip, drip every week, every few days of another negative message, because that's what then fuels the toxic public perception, which can then lead to these other harms, including the horrible rise in hate crime.
Yeah, sure. And Ben, I mean, you with Pink News, you report on this all the time. I'm constantly reading articles on Pink News about you reporting on the hate in the legacy media. Can you speak to some of the kind of the narratives that we're seeing?
Yeah, and thank you for using legacy media. It's a phrase that is a term that I like to use at the moment because that's the reality. These are just like the established legacy media. I don't think that they're fit for the future. I'm really pleased that Pink News reaches over 100 million people each month and around the world. And that really demonstrates to us that there is a massive audience, not for this type of content that we're talking about here, the anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ plus content that you'll see in the legacy media. Mostly, I really agree with what was just said. It's basically scaremongering, and it's frankly like misleading journalism. It's journalism that's designed to try and delegitimize organizations. I mean, businesses like Pink News, organizations, charities like Stonewall, like Mermaids. There's sometimes legitimate questions that are contained within the journalism, but the framing of it, I don't consider to be particularly legitimate. It's designed to create anger, confusion, fear in the population. And you can see that with the changes to public attitudes. And those changes in public attitudes run contrary to the changes on LGB issues. So when it comes to like same-sex relationships, support for same-sex marriage, that's moving in a very different direction. And it was making me think back to, it's 10 years since I launched the Out for Marriage campaign for same-sex marriage. And at the time, a lot of these same papers, not the Times actually, the Times are very much on our side, but the Telegraph and the Mail were running sort of scare stories. But the difference was that a lot of the readership knew a gay couple or same-sex couple, or they had a gay couple in their family. So they were talking, when you were seeing those scare stories, they were talking about people that they knew. When it comes to trans and non-binary people, I don't think from the wider population, people necessarily know, well, they might not know someone's trans or non-binary for starters. And so what they're actually talking about is a feared other that they can't, that is just basically a creation of the newspapers. So when we talk about, the papers talk about the trans lobby, I mean, if there is a trans lobby, I mean, it's not very powerful given that the the government's abandoned reforms to the Gender Recognition Act that Theresa May promised at the Pink News Awards in 2017. That the government's rolling back on things. You're seeing both within the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, frankly, moving backwards on these things. It's only in Scotland with the undisclosed National Party that we're seeing progress. So if there is this super powerful trans lobby, where is it? But it hasn't succeeded. And actually that's because they're painting a false narrative to create fear.
Create fear. And why are they
sell papers, frankly.
Yeah, so why are they coming to you, Richard, as well? Like, why are they trying to create this fear? Like, what is it that's really driving this kind of hate, this rise in hate in the media?
Well, the sort of, I guess the elephant in the room there is hate sells. It shouldn't, but it's a fact of life that there's a business model. Hate is part of the business model. If you have a website and you're prepared to run carefully crafted, hateful clickbait, pumping out these toxic messages, it's harming our society, it's harming people in our society, but it is an effective way, unfortunately, of driving clicks to your website.
So it's also effective in the opposite direction, right? So where does a lot of Pink News web traffic come from? It's things countering that narrative. And so the weird thing is, it's the division that
the
causes
polarization, the engagement,
on it. And
but maybe the other thing to say is that this has proliferated in the last few years, kind of in tandem with the rise of online advertising. So without intending to, the advertising industry has influenced the media to go in this more polarizing direction. And that's why you need to then think about what do we change systemically to counter that.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, I mean, I've got this chart that I've just put up here. So, that 50% of news publisher revenue globally comes from advertising. So you can see that their revenue is what's driving, being able to capture this revenue, right? One of the things I'm interested in talking about, the obstacles to inclusion within the media planning and kind of the media planning and buying process. So I think it's really interesting to have Florie here as a brand owner who can kind of decide where to direct that media spend, and also you, Michelle, working at an independent media agency, advising clients on where to be able to spend their money. So just would like you to talk a little bit about the dynamics when it comes to that process and how you can kind of better drive inclusion in that process. Florie, I'm going to come to you first. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think as a brand, we obviously would claim that we are inclusive, and I think within my company, hand on heart, I've got people who are usually passionate about inclusion, but sometimes I think we forget that we're so stuck into the driving the numbers that we just forget about what that actually means behind the scenes, about where the money is actually going. A good example would be for us, one of our key media is influencer marketing. It's quite a fascinating industry, actually, if you ever want to pay attention to it. It's a bit crazy the way this thing works. And I arrived in the company, and then I was kind of questioning the strategy. How do we do influencer marketing? And I was kind of given a very data-driven approach to influencer marketing. I was told, okay, we've got this spreadsheet. We look at these people. We look at these criteria, and we've done some analysis. And the people and then we select our influencers based on this spreadsheet. Click a button, ask questions, and then we get to the spreadsheet. And then I started looking at, okay, who are these people? And then I opened the kind of the feed about where we were in. And it was basically all kind of white, blonde women. No offense to white, blonde women, but it kind of looked like we were advertising with only the same types of people. And it wasn't because it was coming from a bad place. It was just that we hadn't really paid attention. We were kind of so focused on the outcome, on the numbers, that we kind of forgotten to look at what actually was kind of happening. And then when I was kind of looking at kind of this talk, and then I was kind of thinking about, okay, I was like, well, am I funding hate? I was like, really, like, as an advertiser, really asking myself a question. I was like, am I really funding hate? And I think, reality probably we are right now, not purposely, but we, again, focusing on numbers. We also have this kind of false sense of security with this concept of brand safety, which is like a key thing in our industry. When we do a brief to an agency, we're like, okay, I'm going to brief you. I want it to be brand safe. And then I'm turning to Michelle and I'm like, good luck. Just keep me brand safe. But the brand safety concept is quite flawed actually, because it's all about where your brand appears against in terms of content. So if I
ask, is it brand safe to appear
It's
next
not.
to something which attacks a minority community?
But we might exclude that by saying, okay, I'm gonna exclude certain keywords. So I don't know, like gun violence. I don't want to appear about anything talking about guns. But then, if the Daily Mail runs an article about skincare, my brand might appear against it because it won't be considered as brand unsafe because the article is about skincare. So, yeah, there's a lot, I think, in terms of like advertisers maybe not looking at themselves in the mirror as much that they should, and obviously we're trying to, but we're on a bit of a journey, I think. But if my brand was, we're quite a small company, we care a huge amount, and we sometimes get it wrong. I suspect that it's the case of so many advertisers, and that's why the money is going in the wrong places, really.
Sure, that makes sense.
I was going to say,
Michelle?
just I agree with Florian, just building on the thing of like, what we're guilty of and the obstacles in the kind of agencies that land is like, we look at reach. We work on a lot of brand campaigns, so literally like reach, then we get a result and going, oh, we're reaching 96% of all adults. But are we really reaching the right people? So it's kind of the obstacle there is kind of looking at your kind of media plan and going, actually, we're reaching 96% of all adults, but actually, how many of the trans community we're reaching? How many of like, you know, the queer community we're reaching? Like looking in at every intersect and actually looking and going, actually, are we reaching them? If not, actually look at Pink News. Let's look at other media channels that actually are targeting that specific audience. So I think it's down to us as well in terms of like not looking at the, you know, we just want one target audience in terms of like, oh, reach. Let's look at get under the bonnet and actually be honest with ourselves. And as Florie said, look in the mirror and go, actually, are we really reaching the right audience? And I guess as well from a media point of view, in terms of like planning and buying, sometimes we feel like we need to do like a massive partnership or like a big token, you know, like output, but sometimes it does just start small with looking at, you know, who you're funding, actually like looking at like, you know, in terms of that brand safe, like, you know, that's one thing to do, but actually why are we not looking at sentiment? Because as Florie said, like there could be an article on skincare, but really and truly they could be quite, you know, transphobic, but it's actually getting the actual suppliers, the media owners that actually really go and invest in technology and looking at like sentiment and all that. I think there's one that Reach do, which is Mantis, but actually forcing their hand to kind of look at these actual, you know, tech that we've got there to actually see what the real sentiment is behind it and actually then removing those ads. Because I only once we do that in terms of money talks, we've touched upon it before, if the money's there, like, you know, if the reach is there, money will go there naturally, and that's through programmatic buys or wherever it might be. But as soon as that money's removed, trust me, they'll start making changes. I think for the first time, because there's been no consequences from some of the kind of articles and editorials that's put out, that's why people will continue. That's why, you know, hate is on the rise. But I think for the first time ever, with Twitter, what's going on there, we're starting to really see like actual agencies, brands, like really taking a stand and pull money out. I'll be interested to see like, you know, what happens post that. I think that started with the whole Molly Russell case as well. But this is the first time I'm starting to see like, you know, brands really taking a stand and actually making that change. And who knows, I mean, Elon Musk, I mean, what a guy. But I mean, like... who knows if that will change, it will change anything like right now, but the fact that people are actually putting their money where their mouth is and going, actually, I'm going to just outwardly remove advertising from that platform, it will drive change.
Cool. Richard, I want to just bring us on that point then, to talk a little bit about, I think, you know, your campaign with the Daily Express. I'm really interested in what happened there, and then we've got a short 1-minute video which just shows the impact that you had.
So our experience, so we started off as a small group of volunteers in a Facebook group. We've now got over 200,000 followers on Facebook. But the power of it is just people saying, please stop funding hate, this affects me personally. And advertisers have responded. And in the last 5 years, we've seen this kind of cultural change within advertising to the point where things have got to with Twitter. But along the way, I think there's an example here where the Daily Mail in 2018 did this horrible attack on the British Olympic hero, Tom Daley, that was really outraged a lot of people for the kind of homophobic overtones. And the advertisers stampeded away, including brands like Centre Parks and the South Bank Centre, who aren't necessarily seen as super radical, but they just didn't want to be next to this stuff. We've also seen advertisers leave the Daily Express to the point where a new editor came in and took a very different tone. And I'll stop there. You can play the video.
I'm hoping this video works. Is there a video? Yes.
What's been your biggest success, do you think, in terms of change?
We were on the kind of Stop Funding Hate list. And, you know, I was conscious of that from kind of early days. And
Because of Islamophobia?
yeah, that kind of troubled me greatly. Because, you know, stop funding hate. I mean, the mere words don't resonate well with anybody. And they published a report actually not long into my tenure that kind of said, look, they noted the Express had changed, and that was really important to me. You know, last night I appeared at the House of Commons and spoke. It was the Muslim Council of Britain who've just published a report on Islamophobia in the press. And Baroness Vossi got up and praised the Express for the changes that we've made. And you know what? If it's the only thing I've ever done in my career, you know, fine, I'll stick at that.
Great. I mean, it works, right? Yeah, I mean, well done on that, Richard. I mean, you must have been very proud to have been involved in that.
It's just amazing. I mean, the thing about this campaign is it's had far more of an impact than we ever thought it would. But I think the reason for that is that most people in this country and in society don't like the hate, and that whether it's people who work in advertising, whether it's ordinary consumers, and just loads of people have got out behind it. And once people could see that this started to work, this was working, a lot of people maybe who'd felt a bit powerless before really got behind it, and that was really what made the difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's really impressive. And I think one of the things when we spoke before as well, I was thinking a lot about what you said about good cop and bad cop. And I talk about it in terms of like carrot and stick. And Ben, I just want to, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, you know, stop funding hate, right? But like, can we start funding love?
Yeah, well, I think it's about funding the future. So I'll give you a couple of like thoughts. So Pink News has, as I said, 100 million users, 100 plus million users each month. Our largest cohort of our users are on Snapchat, where we have 30 different shows. The Express isn't on there, but the Mail is, the Telegraph is. We're one of the biggest publishers on there. What's very interesting is the Daily Mail and the Telegraph on Snapchat doesn't carry this sort of particularly the transphobic, anti-LGBT content, because it just wouldn't work. They know how they're talking to an audience, and it's all about numbers, right? And so that the audience will just drop away. The other thing that's been very interesting for us on Snap is there we have huge reach, right? We're in the top. We normally the top number one, number two publisher on there in the UK, much bigger than like Telegraph and things like that, Sun or whatever. But so we get a lot of business as usual advertising on there. It's mostly sold through programmatic. We serve billions of ads impressions each month. However, we haven't yet been able to convince brands and agencies to do business as usual advertising with us on the web or on our other social platforms. So for them, it's only if you're going to do a LGBT messaging. Linda, our head of brand agency partnership, will tell you, he's somewhere in the back waving her hand, that contact her during like the run up to Pride Month. It's insane. Everyone's contacting. And then those people go away because they think gay people, LGBTQ plus people only exist during 1 month of
like
the
Christmas,
year.
right?
Yeah, well, Christmas and maybe next year for like Eurovision. But it's those very specific moments, but we don't exist. Like, I'll give you an example. A large bank represented by a large agency contacted me during the first COVID lockdowns to say, Pride is cancelled this year, so we've decided not to do any LGBTQ plus advertising. So I was like, firstly, it's not cancelled. The physical march isn't happening. We were running a digital-only event. Pride is a concept. It's not just a month. LGBTQ plus people exist all year round. I have to say, I basically gave them a big lesson by email, and then they didn't reply. But I don't think they liked that lesson. But I contacted the brand directly to say we're basically being messed around by the agency, and the brand has been working with us directly instead. But that same agency, when there was Pride running, when we started to run, they did a big takeover for Pride period on the web. Their block list contained every word relating to Pride, because they were like, well, our block list includes LGBT things because there's like transphobic and homophobic hate in the media, but it was so like there was no nuance there, and so it didn't really work. So I kind of think there's a lot of lessons that it's really easy for agencies to say, and brands, we really care about like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's like a £5,000 campaign. Great. We serve, as I said, billions of ad impressions. That 5,000 is not going to, I'll take it, but it's not going to get you very far. Yeah. But start spending money properly, start spending money as usual. It needs to be business as usual. It can't just be little piecemeal campaigns. And actually, because those piecemeal campaigns are actually hard for the agency and the brand to deliver, conceptualize, and for the media to send. If you're just doing an advert for what's on sale for like pre-Christmas in a supermarket, well, I'll give you a big surprise. LGBTQ people buy food. So you can also show that advert.
I think that's a. I mean, we're reaching the end of our time, but that's a really great point to end on. That business as usual. Queer people exist all year round, and even on times where maybe Pride is not taking place in a physical way. Thank you so much. We could talk about this for hours. I mean, I personally could. But thank you so much for everybody who's joined me on the panel today. I know we didn't get to talk about everything.
Enjoy. Pink News is sponsoring some drinks later, so have a Pink News cocktail and stuff like that.
You're going to want to come to this after event. We've been working very hard on it, and there's an amazing drag act that I really want you all to come and see. So please do that. I just want to kind of end. We're not going to have time for questions, unfortunately. I know you were all begging to ask them, but I'm sorry about that. But I just want to end on one note. Let me progress this question slide that you're not going to get a chance to do. Talk to us, essentially. I founded the advocacy and activism work stream within Outvertising earlier this year because I wanted to formalize a space for Outvertising to tackle hard questions like this one that we've discussed today. We want this panel to be a start of a discussion. It's not just a nice chat on the stage today. It's actually a hard chat, but it needs to be the start of action. It can't just be conversation. And so what I'm asking is if you have ideas, influence, or both when it comes to this topic in particular, and you want to see change too, then we want to speak to you at the end of this session. These are my co-directors. You've got Ant there and you've got James, and we're all in the room with you today. So what I would ask you to do is just come and approach us. We're very friendly. We don't bite. Ant sometimes, but no, please. Yes. So please come talk to us or drop us an email. I'll leave this up so you can screenshot it because you're obviously going to want to email us. Thank you very much. Thank you for my panelists again.